Chapter 10. A Broken Connection. "You are certain of your facts?" inquired Mr. Parker, rather startled by the information supplied by Penny. "Well, I saw the register when I signed it. At the time, I thought very little about it. I suppose the name stuck in my mind because the Comstocks acted so funny about that room. I believe you said they didn't wish you to occupy it." "Mrs. Comstock didn't. Her husband was all for chucking me in there with those hideous portraits." "Portraits in a bedroom?" "4 of them. One fellow in a red hat had eyes that give you the shivers." "I'm not interested in that part," said Mr. Parker. "But you may have stumbled into something, Penny." "I think so myself, Dad." "I'll assign Jerry Livingston to the story," Mr. Parker continued. "He has a nose for news, and he may dig up some interesting facts." "By that, I take it you don't consider mine especially interesting?" "Interesting, but a trifle too fanciful for the Riverview Star. We can't print stories about portraits that wink and roll their eyes, even if it would brighten up the art section. I'll admit that once, not so long ago, you proved your old dad to be a bit too conservative. Something about a witch doll, wasn't it?" "That's right," said Penny. "Dad, if you send Jerry out to the old mansion, warn him not to mention my name. It might get Laura into trouble with the Comstocks." "I'll remember. Anyway, Jerry probably won't get out there today. He'll be tied up with the Elks Convention story. I'll have him contact the Comstocks by telephone." "He'll learn nothing that way, Dad." "Then I'll send Jerry or some other reporter to White Falls tomorrow." "I thought news stories were supposed to be timely, Dad. If you've hurried, you might get a big scoop." "And we might get a big libel suit," her father added grimly. "We'll have to feel our way cautiously on this story, Penny. It's dangerous business to publish that a man disappeared from a certain house, especially when there is no arrest in the case." "I suppose you're right," Penny agreed reluctantly. She turned to leave. "Please ask Jerry to come here into my office," Mr. Parker instructed. "I'll give him his news assignment." Penny closed the door behind her and spoke politely to Mr. DeWitt, the city editor. She paused beside the desk of a young, dark-haired reporter who sat hammering at a typewriter, hat pushed back on his head. Secretly, Penny considered Jerry Livingston quite the most handsome and brilliant reporter on the Star's staff. "Well, if it isn't our bright Penny," he chuckled, doffing his hat in her honor. "What's the latest news from the front?" "I hate to break it," replied Penny in a mock seriousness. "Dad wishes to see you in his inner sanctum right away." Jerry's chair scraped on the floor as he got quickly to his feet. "What's up, Penny?" "Shouldn't be surprised if he intends to fire you," she laughed, turning away. "You deserve it." Penny drove home to find Mrs. Weems, the housekeeper, rather worried from her lengthy absence. She was a middle-aged widow, tall and wiry, with an amazing amount of energy, and had worked at the Parker home so many years that she regarded Penny as her own daughter. "Have you had your breakfast, child?" she inquired solacely. "Yes, hours ago in White Falls," Penny responded. "Still, if you'd urge me, I could eat a dish of those fresh strawberries you've picked over there." "I declare you're always hungry," the housekeeper laughed, sorting out the largest berries. "But I wish you would put on a little flesh." I don't, declared Penny. "Fat girls simply get nowhere these days. But I do wish my brains would expand a little. I have a job on my hands that requires a lot of deep thinking." "What are you up to now?" Mrs. Weems inquired suspiciously. "I hope it's nothing like the witch doll affair." "No, I'm conjugating upon how to find a stolen houseboat, not to mention a man who disappeared mysteriously from an old mansion." "Quite a large order, I should say," declared the housekeeper. Between strawberries, Penny told Mrs. Weems about her experience at White Falls. She was pleased when the housekeeper promised to send a box of food to Mudcat Joe and his family the next time she made a trip to the river town. "Oh, by the way, Penny," said Mrs. Weems, "while you were gone, Albert Lyman telephoned. He said he would have you play tennis with him this afternoon." "He'll have to find some other girl," Penny decided instantly. "I'm staying close at home today. Anyway, Al has pimples." "Can he help that?" Mrs. Weems inquired mildly. "Yes, he could wash his neck now and then. Al is a very light-headed youth, too," Penny added airily. "I like young men with a purpose." "Such as the reporter Jerry Livingston, I suppose," Mrs. Weems observed with a shrewd insight. Penny laughed and deposited her empty berry dish in the sink, disappearing from the kitchen. Later in the morning, when Albert Lyman telephoned again, she firmly declined the invitation to play tennis. All afternoon she remained at home polishing the mud from her car and doing odd jobs which had accumulated. At 4 o'clock, when her father came from the office, she ran to meet him. "Dad, did he telephone?" she asked eagerly. "Did who telephone, Penny?" Mr. Parker inquired. "Why, Mr. Harmon, of course." "No, not while I was at the office." "I thought surely he would," said Penny in disappointment. "Mr. Harmon told us he might not telephone before tomorrow." "Yes, that's true. Dad, you heard nothing more about the disappearance?" "No. Jerry will get to work on the story tomorrow after he talks with Harmon. But don't count upon it developing into anything tremendous, Penny." Despite her father's words, Penny became increasingly excited as she thought of what might develop at the old mansion. In the morning she was surprised Mr. Parker by climbing into the car beside him when he was ready to start for the newspaper office. "Why am I thus honored?" he inquired. "Oh, I'd like to be on hand when the telephone call comes through from Mr. Harmon." "I can let you know from the office." "You might forget," said Penny. "No, if you don't mind me being underfoot, I'll just tag along." During the first hour she busied herself writing letters. After that, time passed very slowly. She read the morning edition of the Star, commenting unfavorably upon one of Mr. Parker's editorials, and then wandered out into the main room to watch Bert Kessinger draw a cartoon. She glanced hopefully towards Jerry's desk, but it was vacant. Finally, she went back into the private office and sat down again. The telephone rang many times, and always Penny straightened alertly, but the call was never from Mr. Harmon. "What do you suppose is the matter with that man?" she grumbled. "Here it is 11 o'clock and not a word from him." "He probably forgot," answered Mr. Parker. "After you've been in the newspaper business as long as I have, you'll learn that promises don't mean a great deal." "But he was so empathetic, Dad. I can't help thinking he would have telephoned if something hadn't happened." "No doubt your clue about Merriman was a dud," said Mr. Parker. "Possibly Mr. Harmon decided to return to Chicago yesterday. That didn't have prevented him from letting us know." Penny walked over to her father's desk. "Dad, I have a notion to telephone Laura. She could tell me whether or not Mr. Harmon went to the old mansion yesterday." "Not a bad idea. Go ahead." Penny placed a call, and in a few minutes was connected with Mrs. Anna Comstock. "May I speak with Laura?" she requested. "Miss Blair is busy," returned the woman in a strangely agitated voice. "Can't I take a message?" "No, thank you. I must speak with Laura," Penny insisted. "I assure you it's important." "You're not a reporter?" Mrs. Comstock demanded. "No," replied Penny, wondering about the question. "Just a minute," said the woman. There was a long wait while Penny held the receiver. Several times she glanced at her wristwatch, wondering why Mrs. Comstock delayed in bringing Laura to the telephone. She had made a serious mistake in not making a person-to-person call, for the newspaper was being charged for the elapsed time. Penny was on the verge of hanging up the receiver when she heard Laura's voice at the other end of the line. "Hello, is that you, Laura?" she asked eagerly. "This is Penny. I called to ask—" "I can't talk now," Laura interrupted in a tense voice. "Oh, Penny, dreadful things go on here. Mr. Harmon—" There was a sharp click, as if the receiver had been replaced in the hook. The connection had been broken. "Do, do, do, do."